Good afternoon. Today is Monday, the 9th of June, 2025, just after 1 o'clock. Welcome to UK Column News. I'm your host, Brian Gerrish. Delighted to have Ben Rubin with me here in the studio. And we'll also be joined by Diane Rasmussen-McCaddy from the northeast of England. Well, here we are. It's Monday. I hope everyone had a good weekend. I had a fascinating weekend because I got invited to breakfast, which led to a very interesting conversation with some very kind gentlemen. Perhaps more on that in extra time. But here we are. We are in UK. If we look at the media, it is absolute chaos. We're just going to talk about that chaos very briefly, but we really want to move people's attention past the chaos and the confusion and the anxiety, and we want to get people actually looking at what is the real threat to the United Kingdom. So we are moving away from what everybody else is reporting, at least today, and we're going to have a look at what we think the threat is and why people need to understand what's happening and how indeed we are being attacked by our own government. So Ben, you're going to be looking at MakeSpace Oxford, theory of change, amongst other things. We're going to be having a little look at local authority change in England with a particular focus on Plymouth. Ben, you're going to be having a look at the building of a collaborative society. This is all tied in together, and we're going to take our audience through this really critical little journey as to how this thing works. And Diane, you've been interacting with the University of York, which is very special, of course, because we have our events planned for October in York. But what have you been having a look at? Well, I believe it's making waves. It is disinformation, it's the New World Order, and it's also whether Europe will be safe. So let's have a look at the meat. And of course, many people at the moment distracted with Los Angeles. We've got a little clip here, which if we just bring on screen. Now, essentially, this is what the media is drowning in at the moment. This is the BBC apparently filming from Los Angeles, although it says this video only has partial sound. You'll see the police at one stage in this video clip beating protesters with batons. What is it all about? It's about getting rid of illegal migrants in America, at least. But there's some pretty unpleasant scenes. And what's caused it? Well, we're showing it just to reflect what the media is talking about. Here's the BBC. And if we look at their front page from earlier this morning, it's chaos, it's unrest, it's breakdown. It's the Brit Awards, and generally it's supporting Dross. The newspapers are as bad. We've got everything from hotter than Morocco to the policing is broken. We've then got the insanity. We've got delays over winter fuel. And then we've got insanity over migration, more chaos, breakdown and confusion. More from the Mail to do with Los Angeles. Los Angeles burns. Is it reality or is it a film? And Daily Mail is obviously not quite sure. But the media, oh my goodness, they love it because there's violence and breakdown occurring in the States over migration. But the Telegraph over the weekend came out with this headline, which I found critical. Concern over mass migration is terrorist ideology. And if you add a little bit of text here, mass migration or criticism of mass migration is terrorist ideology that requires intervention by the government's anti-radicalisation prevent programme. So this is the smoke and mirrors, the fear, the anxiety which the UK public are being taken through. We are now going to delve into the real danger lurking behind the scenes. Ben, what have you got?
Well, it's chaos out there, isn't it, Brian? Everything's breaking down. But don't worry, there's a lovely bunch of people up in Oxford building a new world order. Let's hear a little bit about MakeSpace.
MakeSpace Oxford was set up for and by a coalition of local community groups and enterprises who are being priced out of one of the least affordable cities in the UK and one of the most unequal. At MakeSpace, we believe the most sustainable building is the one you don't have to build, and that all the skills and creativity we need to build vibrant, thriving places already exists locally, everywhere, and it just needs the conditions to grow. We witnessed the rising number of vacant buildings on our high streets and began unlocking these on a temporary, meanwhile basis, transforming spaces into affordable, community-driven places, nurturing connection and support, making a home for creatives, makers, doers, fixers and dreamers. And we use Meanwhile as a catalyst to build towards community ownership and wider systemic change. We're locally rooted and place-based, but developing approaches relevant at a global scale. In the last 5 years, we've scaled our model to bring back into use 30 vacant buildings, establishing hubs across Oxfordshire and making space for nearly 200 purpose-driven groups. Artists, tailors, weavers, makers, architects, community cafes, restaurants, dance theatres, roasters and organisers, all who want to build a mutually supportive community and prototype new forms of civic and social infrastructure. And we're now adapting and replicating this model with local groups across the country, with the ambition to transform our declining town centres into places owned and managed by the people that live there, building community wealth, climate resilience and fostering cultures of care and connection.
So I'll just say, if I may, Ben, police and military on the streets with batons beating people, that's very engaging news. It's dangerous, of course, but what we are showing you in these soft videos, equally, if not more dangerous.
Well, indeed, because that's what they're driving people towards. So the breakdown of the current system is designed to necessitate the creation of a new one. And this is the kind of location and innovation hub where this is happening, basically. So the thing that really strikes me about that video is that on the surface, it sounds lovely and touchy-feely and friendly and nice, but then you actually break down what they've said and what they're doing, and it becomes quite terrifying, actually. So let's just have a little look at this. What are they doing? They're taking over post-industrial and retail spaces on what they call a meanwhile basis, right? So this is a consequence of the deliberate deindustrialization of the country over the past 40 or 50 years, and the high street has been decimated by the internet, right, primarily, right? So this is moving into the vacuum that's been created by industrial policy in the UK over the past 50 years that has basically destroyed the country. Yeah, we have no wealth creating capacity. We have no communal spaces. It's been a radical transformation. It's been done deliberately in order to drive people towards this. Yeah. They are prototyping new forms of civic and social infrastructure. They're creating community wealth, right? Really importantly, this is about climate resilience. So climate change is driving this. Cultures of care and connection across the whole of Oxfordshire. They're adapting and replicating this across the country, and they're also developing approaches that are relevant at a global scale, right? So this is something that looks like it's just going on at a local level, organically popping up in Oxfordshire, but actually this is operating in a global ecosystem, and it is speaking to that ecosystem, and that message is going up, and it's also coming back down again as well, importantly. Now, let's have a little look at the blueprint for this thing, right? Because they actually published this, and this post you can see on the right-hand side. We're going to talk it through because it has some very revealing language on here, and it basically describes how these innovation hubs work. So we can start in the bottom right-hand corner, and we can see the first thing to notice is that this is a theory of change. Right? Note that language. Any organization that has got a theory of change is a progressive organization driving towards this transformation of the system. Absolutely crucial, right? And they have an approach that they use in this theory of change, which is about, amongst other things, embracing complexity, solidarity over charity. That's an important one because that essentially means the state versus charity. There's a lot of stuff loaded into this, and being transformational and doing it with an understanding of what they call these root problems. Now, the root problems they've identified at the top level there, you can see on the left-hand side, are underused spaces. Again, so this is post-industrial, post-retail, spaces that should be being used properly, frankly, but they're not. But these people move into it on what they call a meanwhile basis, which basically means temporary, but they have to invent new words for everything, apparently. These buildings apparently are climate unsafe. They lack community knowledge and imagination. And importantly, they're built on a substructure of dark matter, right? Get used to this language. You're going to be talking about this a lot. Dark matter, the bottom three levels that you can see there, these are the things that exist beneath the surface that drive what happens in observed reality, right? There's a lot of theory behind this. It's actually something that I used to work with this stuff professionally for many years, right? And the few things that they've identified as being dark matter issues include things like imperialist and extractivist mindset. Right? They're talking about our current culture. Private individualized ownership, that's a problem, apparently. Private ownership's a problem. Supremacy culture, that's a problem. Private intellectual property, antiquated exclusive property rights. Right? These are things that these people want to get away from, right? And they're going to do it using this program, and they're going to introduce learning. You can see that's just come in. The little green stripe is coming in from the side there. So these are new ideas coming in from their network and coming from case studies from other countries, other locations, from research, from storytelling. They love a bit of storytelling. And they're going to use that learning to unlock a new reality. Right. So we saw in the bottom left-hand corner the root problems, that underused space, and they're now going to create that, turn that into a learning space, a creative space that is people and climate safe and connected, and is a storytelling and a platforming space for people to build this new reality from. Right. And then there's a whole bunch of transformation again going on underneath in the dark matter. And ultimately what that's going to drive is new ideas, new culture, new ways of doing things into what they call a dream space. You can see that there. That's the kind of slightly translucent hexagonal cloud thing. And in there it says transforming systems. They are transforming the system. New ownership models, decolonial futures, solidarity networks, a new economy, essentially. That's what they are prototyping and building and scaling in MakeSpace in Oxford. That stuff's getting pushed out into the town, then into the county, and then importantly, it's being used to influence national policy. You can see in the top right-hand corner there, across the country, and then also global policy. And those things then come back down into this physical and virtual location in order to drive change across Oxford, Oxfordshire, the UK, and then internationally and back down again, right? This is a network. They've just decided to do this themselves. Yeah, there's been no discussion about this whatsoever, and it's being driven by these people. So, interesting bunch of funders. So the first one, Step Change Fund, is a debt charity. There's some extremely high-powered finance and civil service people here, including the former head of the pensions regulator. That deserves more scrutiny because I don't know what they're up to and I don't like it. But also the National Lottery Fund, the Community Fund, they're always in the mix in these programs, right? So essentially what you have is people playing the lottery, generally indexed towards working class people, people on lower incomes, essentially funding their own destruction. Right, that's what my interpretation of the National Lottery is. What else have we got there? We've got this thing called Enterprise Oxfordshire, which issued something called the Oxfordshire Internationalisation Plan to 2025 in 2020. Right, so this is a Great Reset organisation, which is actually using funding from the Getting Building Fund, which was launched in 2020. It was £900 million fund, part of the COVID legacy, essentially, right? So this is all about the transformation of the system. We're now into 5 years into this, and this is what these people have been doing with this money. And this is all coming out of central government, right? Absolutely crucially, because the chair of this lady, Ashufta Alam, is a deputy director in the civil service who also oversees £2.5 billion of international climate investments. And it essentially is applying an international development methodology here to the UK. Right. So the British civil service, which is supposed to be sitting in the background running the country, is actually engaged in a radical transformation program to completely rethink and re-engineer our economy, our social systems, governance, and to hook us up to this global network, all being funded by taxpayers who've never been asked about this once.
Thank you very much, Ben. This is very, very serious stuff we're giving you today, and we're going to say this is unique. What UK Column is delivering today is a unique look into the future governance of this country. You haven't been asked about it, you haven't voted on it. It is already being put into place, and it needs people to wake up very quickly. Let's take what Ben has described in Oxford and bring it home to Plymouth. Now, over the weekend, a little magazine dropped through my door, a very small magazine, but one of the headlines caught my eye. Let's see if we can highlight that. Here we are. And basically it says local council reorganisation. And when I got inside the magazine, I had to search for it, a tiny, tiny little article talking about Plymouth expansion plans. Have your say, it said. Now, remember that, have your say. So when we tied the whole thing up together, or I did some work over the weekend, this is Plymouth City Council's big community conversation page. And what is it telling you very, very quickly? It's telling you that this is about bringing power closer to the people. This is bringing centralised government control alongside every man, woman and child. There's no ifs or buts about it. It is bringing power to a controlling level alongside everybody in the community. If we look at some of the details in there, they run some questions. So here we have, why can't things stay the same as they are? Well, actually, what they're really telling you is all of this is going to happen whether you like it or not, because the government has decided without bothering to consult anybody in this country. We know that some people don't like change, and we understand it's difficult for those working at the councils that will no longer exist, because a lot of jobs are going as a result of this programme of work. And then the killer statement here. It is a fact that local government reorganisation is going to happen. Therefore, doing nothing is not an option. Well, this is a bizarre statement. If it's going to happen and you don't have any say in it, doing nothing is not an option. Doing something is an option, but what are they telling you? It's telling us that Devon County Council, as one of many county councils, and a district council, South Hams Council, will cease to exist after this process. So as we see the world they're building, Ben's just covered that, what's happening at the same time is the existing structure of governance in this country is being destroyed. And if we go on to the last one, the big lie, the financial position in local government is not great and hasn't been good for some time. It's therefore essential that the model of local government is reformed. But if we listen to the news about Ukraine, for example, the government has unlimited billions to prosecute that proxy war in Ukraine, but apparently we haven't got money to look after people in local communities through their councils. So I'm going to say this document, to me at least, is a lie from start to finish. It's propaganda. Another question, isn't this a takeover? No, they say this isn't about taking over, it's about the running of services with less duplication. But many people would say that Plymouth City Council can't run the services in Plymouth, so how are they going to expand it? So I'm going to add this. To me, it certainly looks like this is a takeover of the smaller units of governance by Plymouth as what, Ben, a city-state?
Certainly sounds like it, yeah.
And if we continue here, is this a land grab? Well, Plymouth City Council says it isn't. The new council would deliver services but not change land ownership. But Plymouth City Council is the very council that imposes its plan for the city on people living in Plymouth, and of course that impacts on people around it. So you don't elect, or people outside the city don't elect the councillors, but they're going to plan our own smaller communities. And if I just bring the big conversation back on screen again, let's remember what they tell you, at least honestly, early on in this document, and that is that it is bringing power closer to the people. So a new system of control and governance has already been built in UK. Ben has given you a lot of the details of one model in Oxfordshire. But of course, what we know is, or what we can safely assume is going to happen, is that now this new model of governance has been built, the old model of governance is going to be collapsed. Take us on, Ben.
That's what they're doing. And actually, that last slide there, bringing power closer to the people, right? I hear this line all of the time. And the people in this system, and by the way, there are some good, well-meaning people in that system, but what do they say about the road to hell being paved with good intentions? Right? There's a lot of good intentions here. I will give people that. But this idea that bringing power closer to people is good for the people is completely untrue, right? This is very much about totalitarian authority getting its arms around the population in order to force them into doing the things that the state wants them to do. That's what this is all about, right? Now, one of the organizations, and there is a whole ecosystem around this, we're going to talk about this a lot over the coming months. This is the direction of travel. This is the agenda. This one organization right slap bang in the middle of it all, Collaborate, CIC, yeah, community interest company, importantly. That's a new type of structure, which I'll come back to a bit later on. But Collaborate is apparently about building a collaborative society. This is a communitarian, neo-Marxist, Fabian, whatever term you want to use, society. It's not based around individual liberty, freedom of expression, private enterprise, natural law, any of the things that are the foundations of our nation that are being eroded and destroyed by organizations like this, quite frankly. Just have a little bit more of a look at who they are. So they're apparently for social change. Whenever you hear that, social change, social innovation, social transformation, you know they're up to no good. Collaborate is an innovative social consultancy pioneering collaborative thinking and practice to tackle complex challenges across the UK. They say this on their website. We are living in a time of transition, a fait accompli, a bit like your communication from Plymouth Council there, right? This is happening. We are reimagining public services. This is all about putting more power and control into the hands of the state. They've actually written their own manifesto for a collaborative society. We'll provide a link to that. Go and read it. And as I said, they're a community interest company. And this CIC thing is going to come up a lot. Interestingly, it was introduced by Blair in his second term around 2005. So I think this new structure, communitarian structure, has actually been introduced 20 years ago to come to fruition now, right? This is the kind of planning that we're seeing from
that period. And I'll just add to that, Ben. Of course, it was in the Blair era that the Change charity Common Purpose was being run from the office of the Deputy Prime Minister. So all of these things coming now to the fore, and we can see what's been put in place. Yeah,
exactly. Very similar methods, culture, the whole tone of it, very similar to Common Purpose. This was founded in 2012, this organisation, Collaborate, and it was founded by this guy, Lord Victor Adebowale. So very prominent man. He's also got a CBE, by the way, but I couldn't fit it on the top line there. But sorry to undersell you, Lord Victor. But he was a Blair appointee to the House of Lords, one of the first People's Peers back in 2001. So this was the transformation of the upper chamber. This guy was at the vanguard of that. He's the founder and the chair of Collaborate, this organisation that we're talking about. He's also, importantly, chair of the NHS Confederation. And that is a membership organisation that brings together all of the healthcare system for England, Wales and Northern Ireland, right? This guy's extremely central to what's happening in healthcare, and the NHS is a crucial component part of this whole agenda. I essentially see it as a state within a state, right, in terms of its culture.
It's a good description.
Yeah, I think that's the way that we have to understand it. He's also a non-exec of the Co-op. Co-op are heavily into this stuff, and he was named, according to his LinkedIn profile, he's been on the Black Power list every year since 2013. You know, whatever you want to make of that. Now, he's also on the board, or actually up until a couple of months ago, he was on the board with this guy, Axel Heitmuller. And so he was a non-exec at Collaborate until last year for 10 years. Concurrently, he was and still is a senior associate fellow at the Tony Blair Institute for Global Change, specifically focused on healthcare. And he was the CEO of Imperial College Health Partners. So that's Gates Foundation money right there, yeah. And he was also the director of strategy for the NHS Test and Trace program in 2020. Right, so these are the people who are driving the collaboration agenda. And last week, a couple of weeks ago, I think it was, they put out this, what they call the building blocks of place-based learning. And they say we're at the brink of a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to re-examine and reshape how local government operates in England. Exactly what we just heard from Plymouth. We know what works and we can see a better way, but we also know it can be hard to make a shift. Yeah. So how do we make the shift? Well, we've thought it through, and they've developed this thing. So these are the building blocks, and we're going to look from the bottom to the top and just examine their methodology, their framework for understanding society and how they're going to get their hands around it. Right. So we'll start at the bottom. Oh, will we? There we go. Lovely. So there are some systemic conditions in place. These are things that need to be in place in order for them to do their work. So you have to take a strategic, intentional approach to partnership across a place. Apologies for the appalling language, by the way, but this is how these people speak, right? So this is basically, you've got to be conniving and cunning and think this thing through. The second point is trusted collaborative relationships and behaviours. So you need a network of people who are going to comply with you. You need a culture of learning that enables adaptation, which is actually true because things are never exactly the same in every single location. So you've got to test and learn and work out the best approach based on exactly where you are. And you need bold, enabling place leadership, which means you need leadership on the ground who are going to let you do the things that you want to do, right? Really crucially. And you need people on the ground who are able to influence. You need opportunities for people to come together. You need a real focus on voluntary, community and faith organisations. Those are key systemic partners for collaborating the people that are trying to progress this agenda towards collaborative working, towards a communitarian system, right? And they look at the system as a totality. So interestingly, we normally talk about global, national, down to regional. They've actually got rid of the global and the national. They've started straight in at regional and then counties, towns, cities and districts. You're building from the bottom up, basically. So neighbourhoods is at the top. And that's the most important part of this for them. And a lot of this is to do with the NHS, right? So they're using NHS language. So a locality is aligned with a PCN. That's a primary care network. Right, so they're already thinking, probably because of Lord Victor's role with the NHS Confederation, about how to zone out the country based on the NHS and how it's organised, right? And then they're looking at London boroughs, it's about 100,000 people, an NHS neighbourhood, which is the new organisational model for the NHS, 30,000 to 50,000 people. And they're looking at introducing, well, look, citizens' assemblies, we can see there. Participatory democracy, we can see there. Community wealth building, which is about basically the destruction of private wealth. Everything becomes owned by the community, ergo the state. Ultimately, that's what they're doing here.
And parish councils, I can see up there, Ben.
Parish councils, top left. So actually, yeah, that's if you're reading the document from the top down, that's the first thing that they noticed in the neighbourhood section. Right. And this is, we're talking hyper-local. Look at the top line there, underlined in red. Hyper-local decision-making, 150 to 1,500 people. Yeah, they're going extremely granular here. And what they're doing is thinking through all of the different component parts of society that they want to influence and get their arms around in order to force us, the whole of the society, every single member of the population, into compliance with their new collaborative, communitarian, globalized system, right? That's what this document is explaining to us, okay? And there's a bunch of things in there. So we talked about parish council. If we just get that back on screen quickly, I'm going to talk through just a few more. So community asset transfer. So they're going to change the nature of ownership for existing community assets. They're going to pump money into local communities using grants. They're going to introduce things called community businesses. You won't just have a business anymore. It's a community business. And you can work for it, but you can never actually own it properly. And also, crucially, you can never establish generational wealth over decades or centuries or even longer, because everything's owned centrally by the community and not by you as an individual, right? You've got community champions, community anchors, councillors as community activists. That's a big one there, slap bang in the middle. So this idea that councillors, you're not a councillor anymore, you're some kind of change agent who has to galvanise activists and make things happen. You can't just do your job and, administer the really simple, basic things that we need going on in society. You have to be constantly pushing towards a new world order ultimately, right? And then all of this is going to deliver the most. I won't read all of these out because there's a lot in here. We'll provide a link to it though, and I'd suggest downloading it and having your own copy, right? Because this is the game plan for these people. But you can see there in the bottom left, civic participation and trust, people with the power to change what happens in their community. Yeah, power to change. There's actually a charity called Power to Change that is in this ecosystem, and it's got people working right next to Keir Starmer, and this is absolutely embedded into the whole of the system. It's critical to mission delivery, right? So we talked about this organisation, ICON, the Independent Commission on Neighbourhoods, back in March this year, I believe it was. They say there is no pathway to mission delivery without putting neighbourhoods front and centre. And this is what David Halpin from the Behavioural Insights team is spending his time working on right now. This is his project. They've also mapped out, I showed this as well at the time, the entire UK, looking at what they call deprived neighbourhoods that they're going to focus on for state intervention. Yeah, so they've got the whole country scoped out for being brought into this new system. And as I said, this is absolutely reflected in language and policy in the NHS. They're right centre in this. So we've got the neighbourhood health guidelines saying that there's an urgent need to transform the health and care system to a neighbourhood health service, which again is about bringing power closer to the people. It's not about people having more power. And actually, they're already pouring billions of pounds into making this happen inside the NHS, including this £1.5 billion programme for the Plan for Neighbourhoods with 75 areas they've already identified. And this whole thing is already hit the road, basically.
It's already hit the road. The organisation's been set up across the whole of UK, and buildings have been built to bring in this new system of governance. So
it's real. IRL, physical infrastructure is there. It's happening.
Yes.
Yeah, crucially.
Okay, so you heard it on UK Column News. We're going to do more, of course, on subsequent news episodes, but just be aware while you get focused on what's happening overseas or the dross of the BBC, this is the real threat to people in this country. A government which doesn't like us, doesn't want to help us, and it's going to bring in a new system of government, but we know how it's being done. What are we going to do? Well, the key thing is to get people together and make them aware of what's happening. So that's a good time to remind people that on the 18th of October, we'll be having our UK column on location in York. Absolutely fantastic venue. We'll be well up country. And so, Diane, we're very much hoping that people in your locality and across the border into Scotland will be able to join us. So that's going to be fantastic. Now, tomorrow at 1 o'clock, it's not an interview, it's a discussion, but I was together with Gemma Cooper. We are discussing in a very relaxed way the very serious issue of the conference we'd attended back last Friday week, if I've got my days right, and that was about mothers who'd lost children to social services. So very, very interesting discussion, and very nice to see Gemma Cooper on camera with us for that. So do tune in tomorrow at 1 o'clock. We've also got Germ tonight at 7 o'clock. He's going to be having a look at women's liberation, enslaved women. So that will be a very interesting interview with Rachel Wilson. What else have we got coming up? We've got the Irish Medical Council. They've got a meeting. So that's tomorrow, Tuesday, the 10th of June at 1 p.m. Our Irish Medical Council, Kingdom House, Dublin. And after 3 years of vindication, but independent medical regulators are still being sanctioned, and Irish doctors are still being persecuted and and censored. Sorry, medical regulators are still sanctioning the doctors. Irish doctors are still being persecuted and censored. So this is the opportunity to stand up with people in the medical profession in Ireland. Now, Diane, let's bring you on screen. You've been very patient. We've had a lot to cover today. And I know that in extra time, the team of three of us here are going to be talking a lot more about what's happening in the country. But you've been out and about, and you've also been really doing some great work to increase the amount of material on UK Column website. What have you got?
Yeah, thanks, Brian. Hello, Ben. It's great to be here today. I just want to go through a few things first before I get into what I was up to over the weekend. Just a reminder, and I've mentioned this the last few weeks, on Thursday, I will be speaking in defense of libraries. This is sponsored by the Buckingham Academics for Academic Freedom, taking place at the University of Buckingham. It is a free event. If you're able to join us, I would love to see you there. I've heard some rumors that there are some local UK Column viewers who will be joining me, as well as some academics, so it should be a great event. Please join us for that. What else do we have here that I've got going on? We've got for the Finetti Residential School Scottish Parliament debate, which is actually a very serious and important event. I covered this a couple of weeks ago. The updates on the sort of the legislative side in Scottish Parliament. I mentioned a debate would be happening, and it is happening. I've confirmed it's this Thursday, the 12th, 12:45 p.m. And you can either watch it online at scottishparliament.tv, or if you're able to go and get a ticket to go in the public gallery, you can try that as well. I would like to note that because of all of the work that UK Column has been doing for Finetti for the past 3 years is the reason directly that I believe that it's made it to the floor. This is in relation to Alex Cole-Hamilton, who's one of the MSPs who have been supporting Finetti from the beginning, and Colin Smith, who's one of the constituent MSPs of one of the Finetti survivors. And his statement, which got us a floor debate, is based on the evidence that I submitted directly to Scottish Parliament in support of the petition to get the ladies justice. So I just want to thank everyone who's been helping us for the past 3 years to get it to this point. From here, I wanted to talk about some of the material that we have published in the past week as our commissioning editor. This one is by a member who actually I met in our recent event down in Cheltenham. Her name is Hale Bolchowski. She wrote this called Whose Dreams? The LGBTQ plus Manchester Housing Scheme. It's a local thing in Manchester, but you can see very clearly some of these bigger things that they're talking about and how it's happening in one particular locale. Got a few more articles to look at here. This is by Dr. Piers Robinson, From Serum Nerve Agent Attacks to Chlorine Gas, the Syria Chemical Weapons Storytelling Continues. This is part of the series that Piers has been writing for us around the chemical weapons narrative in Syria. Some very obviously serious information in that piece as well. We've got another one here by Andrea Poso, who is, this is the second piece she's written for us. Again, another member that I met in Cheltenham. This is an issue around the tariffs, looking at the Trump tariff policy and free trade and some really interesting things to think about in this article. So, and what else do we have here? This is the one by Dr. Joost Landgrieve. This is part 2 of his 3-part series looking at the banking and financial system. The first one was about how central banks operate. This one is about CBDC, central bank digital currency, which I know is of particular interest to a lot of UK Column viewers. This series is only available to members, so you need to be subscribers of UK Column to view the content by Joost. So please do think about signing up and looking at these articles because they're very important.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Diane. And I'll say to our viewers that, of course, we can only do what we do with your financial support. So if you're not a paid up member of UK Column, please join the UK Column, because it's all our paying members that allow us to do what we do. And as you are about to show us, Diane, the attack on any form of free media is about to skyrocket. So if you value the UK Column, please do support us, sign up, become a member for that very modest monthly subscription. We need more members if we're to weather the storms coming And those storms are coming without any doubt. Now, the other thing I just wanted to say, and this is a little bit unusual, I'm going to do it because we had such a nice email. I can't promise it to everyone, but Craig's mum, Margaret, is 80 years old today, so we wanted to wish her a happy birthday. So there we are, special birthday.
Happy birthday, Margaret.
Well done. Okay, now, Diane, you've been out and about, and it's been quite incredible that in going to some academic events, you have stumbled really into the belly of the beast, which would silence alternative media. And also it's working hard to create waves of change in our society. Tell us about where you've been and what you've discovered.
Yes, so yesterday I was at an event, a whole day of events actually, at the University of York. So they have a yearly event which is called the York Festival of Ideas, which is kind of a range of things that sort of go on for, in this case, it was from the 31st of May to the 13th of June. I think it says over 150 free events to educate, entertain, and inspire. Now, you might wonder why they would offer 150 free events. And so I decided it was a really important thing to look at how they're actually funding these. So if we look at, these are a couple of pages directly from the official program for the entire event. So the University of York is obviously the main sponsor. They get their money through research funding, which I'll look at in just a minute, Joseph Rowntree Foundation, and the train service LNER, which is part of a major train operator up here in the north. So if we look at some of these funders in particular, the Higher Education Innovation Funding is the particular funding scheme from the UK government's Research and Innovation, part of the UK Research Councils, that funds these kinds of programs. And this has a budget overall of £260 million. Obviously, not all of this went to the University of York, but a lot of it did go to funding these events. And the point of this type of innovation funding is what universities call knowledge exchange, which basically means that the universities feel that they have a responsibility to share whatever their work is at the university with the wider public, which then invites people from the public to be able to do things like this and come into the university for free and see what they've been doing. Another funder that was listed on that page from the program is also, as we can put that up here, is another foundation, which is called the Joseph Rowntree Foundation. And Joseph Rowntree was an important person in the history of York. You can look him up if you're interested. But he was known at the time as a philanthropist. And so several of these trust-related organizations that he created have really evolved over time. And now it says that their mission is that they are a social change organization. So going back to what Ben was saying earlier about social change not being up to any good, it says that this part of their mission as well is to speed up the transition to a more equitable and just future where people and planet can flourish. So we're seeing, once again, Sustainable Development Goal language, Agenda 2030, UN language built into this sort of local charity that has been a major funder for the Festival of Ideas. And we can also see that part of the program, the overall the program was called Making Waves for this entire 2-week period. So this year was the 100th anniversary of Joseph's death. And so they've got 2 programs that have been particular to honor him. One is about the benefits of economic growth, and one is about sustainable futures through regional growth. So again, we're seeing this globalist language coming straight through into this particular event. Now, what I went to on Sunday in particular was, again, there were so many things, you can't go to all of them, but if we go into what I was actually attending on Sunday was this series of 3 panels. So I've got just some photos here to kind of show just what it was like on the day. You can see there's kind of a big open area where there were several exhibitions, and a lot of these were for children, which was kind of at odds with the panels that I attended. But anyway, I'll just take you through some photos of what they were doing for children. I can talk about this a little bit more in extra as well. So if we go through these photos, different academic departments, research programs, the ancient crops, future food, plants, and prehistory. So there were things on history and archaeology. We can go through these fairly quickly. We can just go one by one. Some robots, they invited me to come play with the robots, the remote controlled robots that I was allowed to spin around on the floor a little bit. I don't know the purpose of them, but there they were. We have, what else do we have? LNER, so again, the train service, that's one of the sponsors of the Festival of Ideas. They had a setup for children building wooden trains, and you can have sheets for coloring on trains that colored pencils out for the children to play with. This was from archaeology, so pieces of ancient buildings and stone walls and so on from around Yorkshire and the area. So a little bit of archaeology research for children. Originally, I thought this was part of an art department, but it was actually maths and physics, looking at different structures and how the pieces fit together in nature. And they wanted to know if these actually occur in crystals or other natural materials. And so they were having the children try to play with those. We have some bones from animals. And, so again, the archaeology department, allowing children to see these things and put their hands on things directly. We have, what's the next one we have here? The History Archive. Yes, so this was all about looking at the archives and trying to get children to challenge them to see if they could read very old handwriting to understand if it was possible for them to see what the words were at different levels of complexity. At the Ancient DNA Lab, this actually was encouraging children to sort of share their DNA, which is a little bit scary, considering what we know about some of the genetics programs that have been going on recently, but that was part of the fun, apparently. And there's the Zoo Archaeology Lab. So once again, looking at, sort of animals from history and kind of what this meant for science. So not all terribly bad, but again, really different from what I would have expected from the panels that I was attending. Here's one more from the Stable Isotope Lab next to the Ancient DNA Lab. So getting children, I guess, trying to get them interested in science, engineering, and all these different disciplines that they offer at the university. Now, to go to the grown-up part of the day, which took place in the same location, the same venue. This was the series of 3 panels that I attended. The entire day of panels was called A World in Crisis, ? Asking questions about democracy and so on. So this was, there were 3 panels that I attended throughout the day. If we go on to the funding, I'll come back to the panels in just a minute. The major funder for this organization was the Merrill Center for Legal and Political Philosophy at the University of York. They used to be called the Morrell Center for Tolerance. So you could go into a long sort of academic rabbit hole to figure out what tolerance actually means. But you can see at the top, it used to be the Morrell Center for Toleration. Their website has not been updated for about 10 years, as far as I can tell. But they have changed their name in recent times to Legal and Political Philosophy. So there are, again, 3 panels. The second and the third one I will talk about in extra. So there were some interesting and very alarming geopolitical discussions that took place in those. So I've just got photos of those 2 for now. Here's a panel called A New World Order, ? And so some of the people included Evie Espinal, for example, used to work with UN Women UK, and there's some academics on the panel. And the other one that was at the end of the day was the next one was, Is Europe Safe? ? And again, we have some academics and a lot of the media people that were part of these panels were contributors to The Guardian and other very mainstream sources. But the one that I want to focus on in the main news, because there's so much here to talk about, and hopefully I can get some reaction from Ben and Brian at the end of this, was this one called, and this is the particular one that I was the most interested in, this is the first one in the morning, called Disinformation, Polarization, and the Future of Democracy. So there was, in their opinion, a particularly illustrious panel. And what they were doing was splitting themselves up into presenting us with the problems that they see, and then from there, trying to give us solutions about what they see are the problems. So let's break this down a little bit more. If we go into the people that were participating in the panel, so the chair of the panel was this lady called Joan Concannon. She is the Director of External Relations for York University, which is a quite high up position in any university. Looking at, you see here, that part of her job is supporting delivery of institutional objectives, income generation, advocacy, reputation, global and local partnership, and stakeholder engagement. So at any UK university, this is a very important role, very strategic role for a number of reasons that I can go into another time. The 2 panelists that presented us with explaining what the problems are, the first one was Dr. Christopher Featherstone, who's an associate lecturer at the University of York in the politics department. He's been a contributor to The Conversation, which is sort of an academic propaganda website, if you ask me, France 24, LBC, He had a lot to say about Trump, as all of these people did, actually, for the whole day. So positioning himself as an expert on foreign policy in the US and the UK. Professor Aurélien Mondon, I hope I'm saying that correctly, is a professor at the University of Bath. He talked about reactionary politics, used a lot of, in my opinion, rather polarizing language, which I thought the point of the panel was to overcome polarization. But anyway, if we go to the next slide, I've got a photo here of a book that he co-authored just a couple of years ago called Reactionary Democracy, How Racism and the Populist Far Right Became Mainstream. So he is the first author on that book. And we can also see that his publisher, Verso Books, is advertising, just by coincidence, at the top of the page, that they are celebrating Pride Month with 30% off their Pride Month reading list. So those were the first two panelists, and they presented what they saw are the problems. So let's take a look at what they said the problems were. This is a very quick summary. This isn't everything, but here are the main things that I took away from it. These are direct quotes. The problem is that people are believing different sets of facts. So they're not saying that every set of fact is wrong. They're just saying that there are sets of facts, and some of us are believing the wrong ones. There was a lot of criticism about Trump being the problem. One of them called him an empty core, and they made jokes about the, quote, rubbish he says. They said Trump lacks an ideology, and this is part of what leads to disinformation, that other American presidents before him had an ideology, which I guess somehow may have stopped disinformation. They talked quite a bit over and over and over again about the rise of the far right, the problems with populism. Nigel Farage was mentioned, of course. The rise of inequalities and the climate crisis are all part of the problems that we need to solve. So we've got all these terrible problems. Okay, so what do we do to solve it? So who was going to tell us about this? Well, now we have Alexander Hurst, who is an American who has lived in Paris for a very long time, a Guardian contributor. He looks like he's, maybe about, I don't know how old he is, but he doesn't look old enough to have a memoir. Anyway, he has one coming in 2026, which is called Generation Desperation. And the main part of the story is that he basically won and lost $1.2 million trading meme stocks during 2020. But so he goes, I don't know, the book isn't out yet, but he talked about desperation capitalism and all of the other mainstream sources that he was sort of supporting. So the highlight of the panel, I guess we could say, was this lady herself. Her name is Jessica Cecil. She is the non-executive director of Digital Catapult, but she is much more than that. She has a 30-year career in her past, being a BBC veteran and working in a number of roles. She positions herself as a media industry leader and an expert in the field of disinformation. Now, if you look back at UK column reports from, I think, 1 or 2 years ago, you will see the Trusted News Initiative. And Jessica was responsible for founding and creating this Trusted News Initiative, which, of course, is founded by the BBC. She's got a whole other list of things on her CV, but let's take a look at the Trusted News Initiative very quickly. Beyond Fake News, BBC Trusted News Initiative. So it tells us exactly that this is who we're supposed to trust. And don't worry, the BBC and the partners along with them are going to be the ones to make sure that we're all doing the right things. So this is just a screenshot of just some of the many partners that are part of this Trusted News Initiative. So we see the major Associated Press, CBC, which is the BBC equivalent in Canada. We see the tech companies like Meta, Google, Financial Times, Twitter, which of course needs to be updated. They haven't changed that to X. That's a little bit old now. Reuters, Microsoft, the Washington Post, are some of our favorites that are part of these trusted partners under her Trusted News Initiative. So what did they have to say about what the solutions are? Well, let's look at again, these are just quick takeaways from yesterday. Basically, a lot of this came from Jessica saying that one piece of legislation is not enough. We need a much, much bigger plan to combat what she calls disinformation. And she says, well, of course, because it's her organization, the Trusted News Initiative has defined, for the good of the people, a subset of disinformation that poses an immediate threat. And she gave election results as an example of what can happen that could go terribly wrong if there is disinformation that's being spread out there without their permission. And then they can alert the big tech companies like Meta. and supposedly, I guess X now, maybe in TikTok, all the major social media platforms. And the other person who was the other respondent to expressing the solutions, the one who's the Guardian writer and so on, he said that the intervention and regulation need to be things that set the culture. And here was the really scariest part for me, one of the scariest parts out of all of it, that we really need to pay attention to, is that he said that social media private companies such as X and TikTok should be banned. X and TikTok should be banned completely, and that social media to be the only sources for media content in Europe and the UK, because it's to him, it's overwhelmingly obvious that the information that comes from public media is so much more trustworthy than anything that any other private organization could possibly find out on its own. So that is particularly of interest. Now, what happened from here was I decided, of course, I had to ask a question in the question and answer session. And so I asked, and I was taking a lot of notes and paying very close attention. And I asked why they said far right several times throughout the panel as being the problem. Never once did I hear the terms far left. And I asked, well, how can we solve with polarization if this is supposed to be a panel on polarization and the future of democracy? Then maybe we shouldn't be talking about far left or far right at all. And that maybe we should just return to having civil debate in our society to figure out what the problems are and what to do about them and how to save democracy. They had a very, very defensive response to my question. One of them told me the far left doesn't matter because the far right is in power, so we don't even need to talk about the far left. Jessica herself, the Trusted News Initiative lady, looked me in the eye, which is in a big lecture hall, and she still looked at me directly from down at the bottom of the floor, and she said she did not use the term far right. So maybe she didn't, but the rest of them certainly did several times. And there was then the conversation kind of drifted a bit, talking about building local trusted media sources. So I guess, I don't know, maybe some of these new government structures that Ben covered will be providing our media in the future. There was also, it drifted to why there was so much panic about a trans girl in Florida who wanted to play sports on the girls' teams. I don't know where that came from. But the really interesting, exciting, and I want to say good part of it all was that several people came up to me after the session, after I asked my question, and thanked me because they said, you got it right on, because nobody was talking about this. Nobody was talking about the fact that they spent the whole time attacking far right and far right populism, and the question of whether left and right actually exist is a really good question, especially because if we were trying to look at the future of democracy and how to fight polarization, but actually all it turned into was them talking a lot about the far right and fighting disinformation and saying that these sources, including the BBC and all of their trusted partners, are the ones who are going to be telling us the right things, and that everything else needs to be stopped through government control and shutting down private companies and any sort of competition. So with all of that, Ben and Brian, I would love to hear your response to any of this.
Well, Diane, the first thing for me to say is thank you so much for attending that event, because this is brilliant intelligence as to what the other side are thinking and doing. And you've also demonstrated by asking some good questions, the panic that then ensues amongst these people when you challenge them in the right way, reasonable, direct questions. This throws them into no man's land because nobody is supposed to challenge them. So, one, you attended, you learned what they're up to, and we've shared that with our audience today. But then you've gone further and demonstrated the panic that when you challenged them. And then what happened? You got support from people there. So in one event, Diane, you're demonstrating all the things which UK Column would love all of our members to be doing, which is getting out there, finding out what's happening, getting amongst it and challenging it. Because I'll just end really this segment on the parish councils, which Ben pointed out. They are targeting parish councils because they're very worried about bodies that control and support local communities. So the power of the Roundtree organisation or any of these other big organisations, they are huge. They're very powerful in political sense, in a social change sense. But who do they need to control? Individual people at the bottom of the pile at local community level. So when people say, we know what you're doing and we're not having it, this is a huge problem for them. I'll just let you respond to that briefly, Diane, but I am clock watching.
Yeah, no, I just wanted to say that I think it's a perfect example of how we do have the power to take back the power that belongs to us as the people. And I'm really happy, especially after such an interesting event yesterday, that we will be having our next live event in York on the 18th of October, because it's pretty clear by some of the local people that were there that see what's going on. And I think it will be a perfect opportunity, hopefully, for them to come and attend our event and get to meet other people. And then we can all kind of work against this together. So I think it's not all entirely a bad thing.
And have fun, work together and have fun. Now, I'm just going to end and say our message is clearly beginning to resonate with the UK column audience, because over the weekend, I think it was, I had an email. Yes, it was on Saturday. I had an email come in where somebody said, I've found this organisation, they're part of it, aren't they? Well, I had a quick look. Here's Neon. What a lovely group of people. So a big thank you to the UK column viewer for supplying this. And they are clearly seeing what we're seeing. This organisation believes that building movements, these are change movements, is central to winning social justice. That's social justice for them, not us. And if you have a look at the funders, the one that should jump out immediately is the Open Society Foundation. So Mr. Soros has got his tentacles in here, plus many of these other organisations. So let's end there on a very positive note, that it's clear that UK column viewers at least are now seeing what's really attacking them in this country. Yes, we should be worried and concerned for people overseas in Gaza or Ukraine or America even, as their societies come under attack. But if we're going to stay safe in this country, we need to see the threat that our own government is building with our money, our own money. We'll be doing a lot more on this, and I just want to thank you, Diane, and you, Ben, for such a comprehensive news today. Now, if you're a UK column member, you'll be able to join us for extra time in a few minutes, where we're going to go through some of these issues at a slower, more jovial pace. And that's one of the big advantages of being signed up to the UK column. You can enjoy UK column extra, where we cover a whole variety of issues in a very different style, but lots of good information. That's it for today's news. Thank you very much, everybody, for joining us wherever you are in the world. We'll be back for another UK column on Wednesday at 1 o'clock. See you then. Bye-bye.